Just guys sitting in racing chairs talking about cars they drove.
As guys do.
As guys do, you know? Dave VanderWerp, how you doing?
Great.
It's good to have you in our video cave admiring our office furniture.
Yes, it's nice.
We keep it very mature and professional here, as you can tell.
Hands are always at 9 and 3.
Sure, or 12 o'clock, as the kids do these days. Let's talk about Lightning Lap. How did it go for you this year?
It went great. Well, first of all, I mean, it's the best week of work that's out there pretty much anywhere.
Hands down.
Right? It every time, we go do it typically, and then it's usually a month or more later when we're actually putting together that issue, and which we're doing right now. And then, when you sit down to write up these things, it always just hits me all over again, like how freaking cool it is that we have done this 17 times now over the years.
Absolutely. And the cars that you drove this year, it seems like many years, you choose the most eclectic cars, let's say. Would that be an accurate assessment?
Well, perhaps. I've been interested in the electrics, right?
Sure.
I'm very curious about that in regular life, but also in track mode, because that's a very different use case and one that isn't totally sorted out yet, right? And we've had different experiences there, like the i4 last year that would overheat partway through the lap, and so its top speed at the finish line was 12 miles an hour lower than it was at the start line, which is interesting, right? Gas cars just don't do this.
Yeah.
We just don't find this behavior. So that part's interesting. But yeah, this year I was kind of in the 5,000 pound and up club, which is not usually the best track vehicles to pick. Although the EV6 4800, credit,
Yeah, hey, well, you can round, right?
Yeah.
Well, we'll start talking about the Kia EV6. Would it be fair to say that this ended up being one of the more challenging cars to drive this year?
It was, kind of surprisingly, right?
Yeah.
So we've driven this car before on the street. It was actually on our 10 best list one year. And it's fun on the street, and it's a really great EV. The lesser EV6 great EV. The GT, of course, is the performance model. And it's got a lot of power, 576, I think, peak. And so it's fast. And even in the street loop, right? So around our 10 best loop, you can feel the rear end kind of working harder than the average car. It feels more oversteery than the average car, which is fun. And then you get to VIR, and it is not fun anymore. So the EV6 was literally the first day I went out on track on the Tuesday. Just my first casual out lap, and going very slow, just refamiliarization laps, the usual thing, and going through the S's at a very moderate pace, and left, right, left, big oversteer moment, through the grass. This never happens.
Yeah.
Even when you're trying to go for it, this doesn't happen, and it happened at what I thought felt like 6-7 tenths. And so that kind of behavior carried over. It's just really twitchy. It was really wanted to turn in oversteer.
You had oversteer through the kink on the front straight.
Yeah.
Which is very unusual.
Yeah, and not confidence inspiring at all. And that was the problem with the EV6, right? It's the lap times are about as much about making the driver comfortable as they are about the hardware. If it's scary and twitchy and peaky, it's going to be hard to set a quick lap, even if the fundamental, grip and power are there.
So you went off, stability control was off at that point. Did you ever turn it back off again?
Full off, and then I went to sport mode.
Yeah.
And it would still kind of work the rear end. You could feel it want to kick out, but it would at least hold you there, which was good because I didn't want to, be mowing the grass everywhere. So one thing it does have in its favor, it did 139 on the straight, as you can see there. It's a little wiggly under braking there, not super stable under braking, but it did 139 on the straight, and it did not cut power at all. It made full power the whole lap, so that definitely had it working in its favor. So as we'll see, the overall lap time ended up being very similar to the i4, but it was a very different lap. It was all straight line is where it made up the time, and then it lost the time in the corners where the i4 feels much, much better to drive. This EV6, although it's on summer tires, they're not great summer tires, and like we mentioned, it's kind of heavy. So this had the second lowest grip in turn one second only to the Civic
Wow.
SI. So it's down on grip, kind of everywhere. It just is not really a track car.
Of course. Yeah.
And but yeah, the oversteer moments definitely made me be more cautious around. And you can see my hands working everywhere. As you turn in, the rear end coming, you're moving, you're adjusting more than you want to be on this. But it gets around the track okay. It's just not. Doesn't have all the grip it could or should, and the twitchiness, the turn-in twitchiness is just real bad. And really, after driving this, I came away from here and I'm like, oh, I totally understand why Hyundai would take a couple more years to develop its high-performance version of this car, the Ioniq 5N, that'll be out 2025 model.
Well, as it turns out, what's enjoyable on the street at 6/10 or 7/10
exactly
is pants tightening at full speed.
So I don't know if that was deliberate. I don't know if they're tried to kind of dial up the rear end playfulness and the fun factor for the street, and just kind of works against you on the track. And I mean, if you go watch the Nürburgring lap that Kia set in this car, it's a lot of the same.
Okay. Well, it makes sense though, because I can probably count the number of EV6 GTs showing up to track days on one hand, right?
I don't even think you need a hand. Probably. But other than that, I did okay. The brakes got a little soft, but they didn't go away. Tires didn't start out great and kind of got soft. But this isn't for a heavy, taller SUV type vehicle. It wasn't horrible. There have definitely been cars whose brakes gone away worse, tires gone away worse. So for a car probably not intended to be a track car like this, it did respectably, I think, in lap time.
Just to fan some flames, would you say it did better than the Model S that we tested many years ago?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, that thing
test fans.
That thing died. Well, first of all, brake pedal went to the floor.
Yeah.
Going for turn one, and then it was on half power by the S's, I think.
Yeah.
I didn't drive that one. That was Casey, but that's my recollection. I mean, that thing didn't just fall off the power a little bit. It lost half power by a third of the way through the lap.
We still want to have one at Lightning Lap, so
yeah, a good one. I mean, they've come a long way now,
and
obviously we'll get to this later when we talk about the Sapphire, but Model S Plaid with track pack, right? That's a car that could definitely do a quick lap now.
And now for something completely different, the BMW X5 M. Walk me through this vehicle.
So it's going to sound heretical, but this thing's awesome. And as I wrote in the piece, if you roll up to a track day in an X5M, most people are going to assume it was your tow vehicle to get the real car there. But you might be surprised at what it can do on track.
How much power does this have?
So it didn't go up at all. It's 617 horsepower. The 2024 model got a freshening, but not any major changes. But the engine now has a 48-volt mild hybrid system.
So it's heavier.
So it's a bit heavier. So this one was 130 pounds heavier than our last X5M. Nevertheless, it went almost 2.5 seconds quicker. It really feels great. It turns in, it rotates well, it's hooked up, it makes great V8 noises, and I could just really attack the S's. It felt the opposite of what we were just talking about, right? It's so confidence inspiring. You could just lean on it, push on it. It did not do anything untoward. It would just, and this is partially a benefit of SUVs sometimes with a lot of, higher ride height, right? They can just gobble up the curbs. Yeah. It could just jump over curbs with being totally unfazed. It was really, really great. And the brakes, despite it being 5,500 pounds and doing 146 at the end of the straight, the brakes never went away. It took a while for me to adjust to the fact that you could brake this late in a thing, that is this big, this heavy. I'm sitting up this high.
Yeah.
The vantage point just makes you look like this shouldn't work. You can already hear it. So there's a couple spots, and through Hogpen was one of them, where it hung right with the M2 and the Nismo Z this year.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's just, like I said, it doesn't make sense. But
it doesn't make sense in the best way possible, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's great. But it's, again, it doesn't sound right saying this about a big SUV, but it just does the things that a driver wants it to do. It rotates.
Yeah, look at that.
Turns
Wow.
well.
Yeah.
It's very predictable.
And even running into some traffic, probably would have found some time, but still.
No, that was okay.
That was okay?
I don't think I slowed down much. But yeah, I started to really attack the S's here because it just was so stable.
Were you flat?
Confident. No, I think I'm sure I left a little bit there,
little bit.
but not much.
Eating those curbs, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
So again, through the S's, I think it beat the M2.
Wow.
And the Nismo.
Talk about confidence.
Right there, and through the back half of the infield was also like dead nuts with those two cars, which doesn't really make sense.
Yeah. How does the power delivery feel coming out of the tighter corners?
It's good. It's all good. There were a couple spots, and that might have been one of them, where the transmission would so I was in, the sportiest mode, but full automatic. And there were a couple spots where it would sort of upshift prematurely, and then like right at a corner exit point, you're back on the power, and it would it would like upshift, immediately downshift, and you'd be like, oh, what was that?
Yeah.
But other than that, it did a great job. Keeps it in the power, keeps it in the also where it sounds great.
Which is, half the battle, right?
And you can just work this thing and forget that you're driving a giant SUV.
So how much fun would it be to show up with a track day, run this thing competitively? Not competitively, but you know what I mean. Surprise some people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ruin some people's days.
And so when you look at our all-time results board, right? So this is right with a C6 Z06 and a current Cayman.
That's remarkable.
Cayman S,
That's
I believe.
remarkable.
Current Cayman S, the 2.5 liter 4.
So you could definitely.
It's like a serious, you're definitely getting pointed by some serious hardware at a track day.
How did the brakes hold up?
Great.
Yeah?
Yeah, really great.
That's remarkable.
We never touched them. We didn't swap out pads, rotors, anything. So yeah, here we go. We come through with the quickness of an M2 and a Nismo through here.
Yeah.
So this, with the 2.4 seconds gained with this year's X5, it now is in third place for SUVs.
That's
behind the Cayenne Turbo GT Coupe and the Lamborghini Urus, right? Both of which are on serious, cup level tires.
Yeah.
Corsa PZZ4s or whatever they are. This is not. This is on 4S's. So the only two SUVs that beat it are on way better tires.
Yeah.
So this thing on Cup 2s or Corsas probably has a shot at the Cayenne.
Well, hopefully they'll make them available as an option from the dealer next year so we can see if that's the case. Let's switch over now to the Lucid Air Sapphire.
Yes.
The 1,234 horsepower four-door sedan.
Not at the track, though.
Not at the track.
Not at the circuit. Only at the drag strip.
Only at the drag strip. Okay, so how much power does it make for track mode?
First of all, I feel like we should start out by saying this was the intimidation factor of this car was very high.
So much so that, not high enough to make you choose it over the Z.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So Beard talks about this because typically the first night we're there, all the drivers kind of gather around the keyboard and decide who's driving what. And we usually try to do pairings that make sense if the cars are natural competitors and it doesn't make sense to drive cars that are vastly different capabilities. It's hard to turn a quick lap and then turn a quick lap in a car that's 20 seconds slower or something and jump back and forth between those two. Right, so we try to pair them based on lap time. And so the kind of couple cars remaining, the Lucid was one of them because, when you think about the math of 5,300 pounds, 1,000 horsepower, this thing's going to be going a bazillion miles an hour, and it's not going to want to turn or stop. So this is going to be scary. This has kind of been our experience with Model S and Model S Plaid, even especially. And so it was one of the last picks. But yeah, as you alluded to with the Nismo thing, I had a previous issue in a 2009 Nismo where the brakes failed and I ended up in the tire wall at turn 1. So I didn't really want to go back to Nismo anytime. Well, maybe ever again. So Beard took that one and I took the Lucid. But again, like I said, I've been interested in EVs. I really have liked the Lucid Airs that I've driven. Of course, we put the Pure model, the entry-level Air, on the 10 best list this year. It's a great car. And I really wanted to drive the Sapphire. But still, the physics of it are frankly scary.
Yeah, so the power modes, there's like
how
many different tracks?
Track mode. So I think there's 3 modes, but within track, there's 3 sub choices, and those are endurance. So that's more like a track day mode, and that's 767 horsepower only. Yeah, right. So that it doesn't overheat the battery and motors as quick. You can run more laps at a time. And then there's hot lap mode. That's 1,003 horsepower. So that's the mode that we eventually set the lap in. And then there's drag strip mode, which is optimized for quarter mile runs. And that's the 1,234 horsepower. And this one's going to take a while because there's just so much to say about how great this car is.
Well, let's start talking about top speed on the front straight.
Yeah. So 170.8 was on the quick lap. That puts it in 4th place overall behind 3 McLarens only. I believe in this order, 720S, Senna, and 765 LT is the quickest we've ever run at like 176 maybe.
And then an all-electric sedan.
Yeah. Then an all-electric sedan. So, you think about cars that it's faster than on the straightaway, 918 Spider, GT2 RS, 488 Ferrari, Ford GT, on and on and on. The list goes on and on.
But it's not just a straight line car.
No. And that's what's so great about this car. It, despite the first intimidation factor, like the brakes work really well. It turns and corners really well. So this is a mistake, actually. Yeah. This was one of the first runs of the day, and there was kind of a shadow hanging out on the curbing, on the inside curbing of the S's, and I just totally blew past the spot where I should have slowed down and missed the first turn in and had to recover. But, every lap's a collection of mistakes, and this one ended up being the quickest, even with that little goof, which in the S's didn't screw me up too bad.
Watching the speed climb there is just insane.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah.
But there's no getting around the braking points. Like my braking point is basically when that pavement starts to jut out.
The virtual 10 or 11,
which is way earlier than any other car. And on the front, it was funny. The Lucid's hot shoe development driver said, "You're going to want to brake at the virtual 7 marker." Virtual being because they end at 6. Yeah. And that's true. Like you did have to, but the brakes held up. So this was an all-time record, 86.6 miles an hour at that exit point. There's an all-time record, lightning lap record.
That's insane.
But other than that, this was a real good back section here. I got this one really right in this lap, but it just settles and goes and sticks and rotates, and you can get back in the power and just works like a really well-sorted car. Which is saying something because the 2 motors in the back don't have a limited slip or anything. It's all programming.
Really?
And so, each motor is deciding what to do. So to make it feel like a limited slip, the motors are doing different things. Yeah. In some corners they said, we might be overdriving the outer tire while regenning slightly the inner one. And they're doing all kinds of crazy magic stuff to make it feel like just a really well-sorted car.
God, nearly 170 after, on the last front straight. Yeah, there you were talking about the
mistake. And I decided not to bail out, which is good. Anyway, this car is was just fantastic.
Yeah.
The high-speed stability was terrific. So, yeah, I'm trying to think where to start here. So there's so much to cover. So obviously we haven't run a Model S Plaid here, but just in regular testing back before the track pack, the top speed was 160. And it's hard to keep it in its lane. Its high-speed stability is so bad. It just wanders all over the place. And at one of the track days that we've co-hosted at VAR for people, a guy brought his Model S Plaid and a pro driver to drive it. That guy did a 250.6, I think. Right? So quick time, but like nowhere near this car. And sort of speaking to the twitchiness of that car, like he also did a tank slapper in the S's.
Not where you want to do
trying to get that lap. So anyway, this car just totally stable at high speed. There's actually more aero work to it than you'd think. Like it has that little lip spoiler on the trunk, but there's actually significant underbody work. And so it adds like 400 pounds of downforce at top speed, but it just feels really stable. Yeah, it's really easy to drive. It didn't feel as fast as it is, and I started out in that endurance mode. It didn't feel overpowered at all, even in the 1,000 horsepower mode. It doesn't feel crazy like, oh, I have to really be careful with the accelerator. I'm going to lose the rear end everywhere. It's just, frankly, it's a win by the team calibrating it. And I know they did a lot of development work at VIR. Dan Edmonds did a feature story with them where he embedded with them for one of their test trips early on. You know, that was a year and a half or 2 years ago.
Yeah, we're talking with Dave Beard. He says how much he had to respect the throttle on the M2, and that's a 400 horsepower, well, quote unquote 400 horsepower car. Well, here we're talking about the Lucid with 1,000 horsepower, and you're like, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. No, it's just all-wheel drive, right?
Sure, but just for the comparison, I mean, it's a pretty crazy statement.
It was hooked up. Yeah. And it cornered neutrally. Yeah. You know, it just felt great. And so when you step back and look at, 244, it puts it on the 21st overall. Which is
wild.
Saying something, right? It would have been in the top 20 without the GT3 and GT3 RS and GT3 Manti this year. And the Lucid guys claimed they would have gotten tattoos if it was in the top 20. So I missed it. It's in the car. Anyway, but they're like, no matter how you slice it, this is really, really impressive. So a 244.3, that beats our EV record, which was the Taycan Turbo S, by 11 or 12 seconds.
Yeah.
Like different neighborhood.
Yeah.
It takes the four-door record by 3.5.
Wow. From
the Panamera Turbo S. It is the next lightest car that's quicker than it is the 918 Spider. It's about 1,600 pounds lighter. So everything quicker than it is way lighter.
Yeah.
And everything quicker than it, except for the 911 Turbo S, was on cups or Corsa tires.
Yeah.
This is on 4Ss. And, of course, I asked the guys, I'm like, hey, so you guys realize that Cup 2s exist in the world. Like, you don't have them on this car. And it was sort of like wink, wink, like there might be another one coming later. But like top to bottom, the Lucid Air is impressive, especially the Sapphire. Like the alignment settings, yes, it gets more negative camber. The Sapphire does, but the alignment settings for the track, like there's no track alignment. This wasn't like a trick alignment.
Really?
The tire's the tire. The 4S is the tire that comes on all of them. Wow. It's the tire that gets whatever it is, 417 miles range. Yeah. Like it isn't changed. So that was one of the reasons why they didn't go like standard cups.
Yeah.
Cup 2s, right, as range and, ride and livability and stuff like that, which I get. And it's a really livable luxury sedan with a big back seat. That's the other thing. Every car above it on the leaderboard, none of them can seat 4 or 5 comfortably, but there's only one car that even has a back seat, and that's the 911 Turbo. So like it's in the hunt with all these cars that are way lighter, have way better tires, and no back seat, That's the other thing. The tires are very modestly sized too.
Yeah.
I think there's only one car that has tires that aren't wider than the Lucid. So it's like the heaviest car on the most modestly sized tires that aren't the best grippy tires, and it still does all this. And it's not just power. I mean, that's the thing that people, I think, will be hard to grasp. It's like, oh, it's 1,000 horsepower. That's why.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, so is the Plaid.
Yeah.
It ran 6 seconds quicker with a pro driver around the same course. And the configuration we run really isn't a horsepower track, which is why if it were, like, this car would be much closer to the top end, not in the top 20,
Yeah.
you know, if it were purely speed. And yeah, 170 is a lot and makes up time there, but the physics of the cornering a car this big and heavy are the physics, and it just that slows it down. And so, yeah, otherwise this car would probably be, you know, up way at the top of the leaderboard.
Well, it sounds like kudos deserved to Lucid, and kudos to you for putting the lap in.
Yeah, I did it. After the third day, I'm like, okay, now I'm gonna. Now, I was joking with the Lucid guys. I'm like, now I'm gonna text my wife and tell her how fast I've been going all week. And you know, 170.8 was the hot lap, but there were a couple laps that were like 171 and a half.
Well, thank you for walking us through the lap and explaining the Lucid. We look forward to seeing maybe something quicker next year.